Facebook group. Those of you who are watching in the Express Entry Law private Facebook group, make sure that you shift over and watch it on the Canadian Immigration Institute so that your questions and your comments will be visible. Because it's a private group, it doesn't work very well when I'm trying to do these live videos for you to be able to post comments that I can see. So I want to give a huge shout out to everybody that's tuning in. I can see people are starting to jump in and join the feed, which is awesome. And there's always there's always pros and cons when we're trying to get this working properly. I've got this new software that I'm using, like I said, and over the last little while, it's been super, super busy. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. As always, I want to thank you for taking the time to join. The purpose of this is to share information on this crazy world of COVID-19, how it impacts on immigration. And so many people have been asking questions to me who are really, really struggling to know how to either extend their work permits in Canada, or if you're outside of Canada, what to do if now you're delayed and you can't get those essential documents that you're getting. There's a number of people now that are finally piling in, which is great. I see we've got YouTube is here. And people from Facebook, great. We've got Steve Hans, we've got Samit on YouTube, Dalbir. My apologies, everyone, for being a little bit late getting started. It has been a crazy morning. I've had a bunch of things that I've been working through, and I had, which has kind of delayed me a little bit. I had some interesting feedback today also from someone, and it really has caused me to revisit how I'm doing these videos. And you'll remember in the past, I've always had these, these broadcasting from different locations. And for some reason, even though I say, hello, my name is Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, ex-immigration officer, and former high school teacher, people assume that I'm an immigration consultant. And repeatedly, I've expressed my frustration with consultants. There are so many out there that really have no business practicing immigration. With that being said, there are some out there that are very, very good, but they're definitely in the minority. So giving people the impression that I am a consultant versus a lawyer is definitely not what I want to portray, because I am. In fact, my role as a lawyer is super important within the Canadian Bar Association, and working as right now, the vice chair. I'll be the chair in September of the national section, and I don't want people to confuse whether or not I'm a lawyer. I spent too many years in school getting to the point where I could actually be called to the bar and be a fully fledged lawyer in the province of Alberta here in Canada. And so I don't want to diminish that. I don't want to, people to think, oh, he's just a consultant and I want to hire a lawyer when I am a lawyer. So just to remind everybody, yes, I am a Canadian immigration lawyer. And with that being said, I'm also going to shift my presentation, because if I look like I'm not professional, if I look like I am not a lawyer, then people are not going to take me seriously. And that is not the impression I want to give. Now, with that being said, I'm still going to be the person I am. I may tend to wear my suit a little bit more, and I'm probably going to shift a little bit away from, broadcasting from different locations, because I can see now where people would just, I'm missing the audience. And the whole object of this is to share everything that I have with as many people in the world. And if people are not taking it seriously and not trusting the information that I'm sharing because I'm in a t-shirt or something like that, then I definitely want to change it. So we're starting a little bit different today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Post where you're listening from, okay? Make sure that you post in the comments. A bunch of them are all funneling in right now. Post where you're listening from, because that's one thing I love to see personally, to see how far these messages are reaching. But today, like all of our special episodes on COVID-19 and the impact of immigration processing in Canada, this is something that people have really, really been desperate to learn about. And I'm just trying to do what I can every Tuesday and Thursday now at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time to share the latest information, just to help you guys figure out what you need to do. Okay, so let's see where people are tuning in from. So we have Jennifer. She's listening on YouTube from India. We have someone from Dubai, but they are unknown, so they're not showing up here. And I'm actually going to start adding these to the broadcast so people can see here. And this is a fun part that I really like. So we've got Adam from San Francisco. We've got Yosera from Victoria. We've got Iffy here listening from Toronto. Excellent. Gerd Iqbal is Surrey. Seger is in Vancouver as well. Oh, look at this. Karen, a permanent resident of Canada, currently stuck in India. Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. Rosie's tuning in from the States, from Lincoln, Nebraska. Wonderful. Anoki is in Accra, Ghana. Welcome. I love this. This is great. We've got someone from Pakistan. We've got Rami listening in from, let's bump this up here. We've got Rami's listening in from Egypt. We've got someone down in Utah. Awesome. Who's joining us. Let's see where else we got here. We've got Marlon. He's tuning in from BC. Hello, Marlon. And we've got Tob who says, hello, boss. Welcome. Someone from Bangladesh. Aksesh is in Winnipeg. Great. I have to post this one. We've got people tuning in from Periscope, which is really cool. He says, Mark, for many, you look too cool to be a lawyer. Apparently, I guess. Awesome. And we've got some other people, generic, just kind of listening in from Canada. We've got someone from India. Let's see. Naveen here is in India. And Mitzi says, am I late? No, you're not late, Mitzi. In fact, I was late getting started with our episode today. Candia is tuning in from YouTube Live from Brampton, and just a ton of people. So if I haven't given you a shout out, apologize, because we've got a really large group of people that are watching again. So thanks so much for tuning in, and thanks for posting where you're listening from. So that's awesome. I'll give a shout out to my good friend Ralph, who's here. And Tob is in Bangladesh. Someone from Ottawa. Oh, que bom! Alguém está a escutar de Lisboa. Muito bom. Eu não sei quem é. I don't know who the person is who's tuning in from Lisbon, but that's awesome. So we've got someone from Portugal, which is my second home, which I love. All right, excellent. Okay, well, we've got a ton. I'm going to stop there, and I'm sorry. Sometimes it's hard not to post these. Bella says, definitely way cool for being a lawyer. Probably the coolest one I know. Okay, that's a little bit of a biased position, given the fact Bella is my sister from another mother. All right. Okay, guys, thanks for tuning in. So what we're doing, as always with these, is trying to answer your questions about immigration. And as a Canadian immigration lawyer, I pay for my services. But over years, I realized that lots of times people ask the same question over and over. And these questions, if they're answered, can drastically improve their chances of succeeding in their immigration or protecting themselves from someone who may be giving them bad information. And because these questions that were commonly asked of me were just so repetitive, at first I started doing a podcast. And you can go and watch my Canadian Immigration podcast. It's on iTunes. Then I transitioned to creating the Express Entry Law private Facebook group. But I realized going on there initially and spending upwards of 3 or 4 hours a day answering people's question, well, only that person would see it. And so that then translated into me discovering Facebook Live videos, which is really kind of the inception of when I started doing these live videos. And I found that by having people post questions just like this, so I'm going to post this up here, but no, I'm not actually going to respond to it yet. Should we add delivery jobs into the personal history? Okay. So these types of questions people ask would result in me being able to answer them once and benefit thousands of people. So I absolutely loved it. But then I realized everybody wasn't on Facebook. And so then I discovered this other app that allows me to broadcast live on Facebook as well as YouTube. And so I want to extend the most heartfelt appreciation and gratitude for the developers of this software, because it has now allowed me to reach an even larger audience, which is fantastic. So that's why I'm doing this. As a Canadian immigration lawyer, I'm tied down often during the day working with my clients. But during this time period, this is when I can actually give back. And so thank you once again for the developers, and thank you for all of you who are tuning in. If you are on Facebook, don't hesitate to share this with other people. Let them know that it's happening. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to do it. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up some questions that were sent in initially by people that are not able to attend live. And those of you who are attending live, hang on for just a little bit. I'm going to get through a few of the questions that were sent in via email. And how do you get your question answered? Well, you can see right here on the screen in the bottom right-hand side, right here, info@holthelaw.com is where you send your email, and just put live Q&A in the subject line, and then we'll know that this is a question that could be considered for an upcoming live immigration Q&A right there. Okay, so we'll stick this one back in its place over here. That's how you can send them. So they're going to get screened by Mauricia, my intake person, and if your question is, if it's general enough, then it will result in likely getting through for me to answer it. Now, there's a ton of questions, and I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but we've picked out some that are probably some of the more common questions that we get that will benefit the vast majority of members. So here, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. I'm going to shrink this down here because you don't need that. And then I'm going to enlarge this a little bit bigger so people can see it. And let's work through some of these questions, okay? All right, this one is Sagan, and he says, I have just one question, but before I ask that question, I would like to thank you for creating such an informative blog. I learned a lot of things. It's really nice of nice of you. However, I still have one more question that I couldn't find the answer. Okay, so here's the question. So I graduated from advertising and marketing, but now I'm working in a restaurant as a manager on my postgrad work permit. I didn't have any manager experience, and I haven't graduated from any school related to this job. Am I still able to get points from this job? Can I get permanent residence like that? Thanks so much, again, sincerely. Okay, so this is a very, very common question. Many of you go to school, you graduate from a Canadian school in whatever degree it is, and then you end up working in food service or other service industry jobs. Often because you are reliable and you show up for work and you do a good job of trying to do the best you can in your job, you end up being promoted and working in supervisory or managerial positions. And so very similar to Sagan here, who is a manager in a restaurant. When it comes to express entry, Canada doesn't care. As long as your Canadian work experience is at a skilled level and you meet the minimum requirements for claiming that Canadian experience, then you can count it. So let me take this, and I'm going to actually try to, I've got a bunch of stuff going on here. I'm going to shift my screen over, and I'm going to show you guys one other thing here. We're going to go right into CEC eligibility, because that's really what most of you in Canada are coming down to. So the eligibility for the Canadian Experience class. So sometimes people say, do I need the minimum experience or education in order to claim the experience? Well, it's not that at all. What you're looking for here when it comes to the actual qualifications, you can see here minimum requirements. What it's focusing on is that you have at least 1 year of skilled experience, and that experience has to be, it could be full-time or the equivalent in part-time. It has to be gained legally, and you can see here, it has to be at a managerial level, a professional level, or a technical job, skill, or trade. So manager is on the list up here. And we haven't talked specifically about your NOC code, but that's okay. And your work experience can be in one or more NOCs, so you can pull out different sections. But this is the part that specifically answers your question, okay? You must show that you performed the duty set out in the lead statement of the occupational description in the National Occupational Classification System. This includes all the essential duties and most of the main duties. Now, I will, for those who are on postgrads, you know that you can't count any work experience that was gained while you were a student. So it's only after you've got your postgrad work permit, or in fact, from the date that you've submitted your postgrad application, that you can start to count that experience. Okay, so when we go to the National Occupational Classification System, if we click on here, actually, I don't like this one. I'm going to go to the NOC 2016. And then I'm going to type in right here, restaurant manager. And I want to show you guys very quickly. So restaurant and food service manager 0631 is probably your NOC code. All we're worried about is that you have performed all of the activities right here in the lead statement. That's what that is. And a substantial number of these main duties. Now, it's always a little bit tricky because immigration sometimes doesn't do a very good job of explaining, the actual legislation. So they say that you've performed all of the duties and essential duties. Well, in here you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 duties. So I'd say maybe about 6 would be considered substantial. So that's what you're getting at. And when it comes to the employment requirements here, these actually don't apply for the purposes of express entry. They do if you're applying for an LMIA-based work permit. So where it says several years of experience, including supervisory experience, are required. Well, for the purposes of Canadian, the express entry process, they actually don't look at that. All they look at is these. Okay. So if you're already working on a postgrad, you're just fine. Okay. Great question. Okay. I'm going to shift back here to my other screen and we're going to move on to the next question. Okay, this one's from Naveen. And Naveen says, how are you? This is Naveen from India. I'm just completing my DIY course I won in the last Q&A. Hey, that's awesome. Okay, we had a little competition the last one, and I gave away some free accesses to the do-it-yourself course that I have. It's very, very useful and informative, but still I have one doubt and question. So the question is, what should I fill in? The first became qualified to practice in this occupation section. And then they go into pharmacist. They worked until May, then they finished. And this is a really specific question, so I'm not going to get into specific details. But the key that you have to realize in this particular question that's within the when you're completing your express entry profile, the reality is that question only really relates to trade level positions. That's really the question that's focused on trade level, but you still have to put something in there. So it really doesn't matter. Often I will look at the NOC code and see, okay, well, what's kind of the general education that would be required if you were in Canada? And I'll use that as a guideline. If it says that a bachelor's degree is an asset or may be required, then I'll use the date that you completed your bachelor's degree as the date you first became qualified. But in other cases, if there is no specific requirement, then often I'll go back to when you completed your high school or you completed whatever work experience that might have been required in order to fill it. And you'll remember when we were looking at the actual education requirements for a hotel manager, a restaurant manager, it says several years of experience, including supervisory, are required. It says completion of a college or other program is usually required. So I would often use that college as the level. But the key here is that you don't need to get too worked up over this, because at the end of the day, it's not really a super critical question. Okay. All right, let's go to Bawa here. So Bawa says, hello, sir. I wish you and your family health and safety. My question for the next EE Live Q&A is, okay, so we'll answer probably one here. So I worked in a bank and there are 2 NOC codes that depict fairly accurately my duties and responsibilities. Assuming that my ex-employer can provide the reference letter according to either NOC code at my request, how do I choose between the NOC codes? Okay, that's a great question. So Bawa, I want to tell you that there's always going to be one that's best. Okay. And in my consultations, I can spend probably 20 minutes with a client going through the actual requirements in order to come up with the proper NOC. Now, there may be 2 that are similar, but there's always going to be one that's the best fit. So in order to figure out how you do it, I always start with the reference letter itself. What does it say? What are the duties in that reference letter? Whatever those duties are, sometimes you have control over it, sometimes you don't. But those duties in your reference letter, I start here and I say, okay, if it's a restaurant manager, plan, organize, direct, control, and evaluate the operations of a restaurant, bar, cafeteria, or other food and beverage service. So I put it there. And then I say, okay, is there a duty that corresponds with this one in the reference letter? I don't want it to be worded exactly the same. That's not the object. The object is to provide the job description exactly as the company would normally describe it, regardless of express entry. But I want to see that there's something similar that talks about me planning, organizing, directing, or controlling the actual operation. That's what a manager does. So when it comes to this type of a question, trying to establish a proper NOC, that is what I focus on. Then I go to the next one. Do I have that? Does it match up? And that's how, is there recruiting staff? Do I set staff work schedules? And I go systematically through every one of these to see how many of these I actually have. And that is how I determine which NOC code is the best. But I go off of not what you think you did. I go off of exactly what your reference letter states. Okay, great question. All right, let's shift back here. Okay, so the next question, this one is from Navjot. And he says, hi, Mark, I have a tiny and somewhat stupid question. There's no question that's a stupid question, is there? But fortunately, he says, I'll ask it nonetheless. Okay, so he says, you usually mention that in our reference letter, we must provide the company website. I want to know where exactly should we provide the company website? And apart from the website, is it advisable that some other information related to the company, like the number of offices and the staff strength and its ranking in Forbes list, also be mentioned? Okay, so those are all great questions, Navjot. And when it comes to the actual process of determining what goes in a reference letter, I think many of you have seen that the EE Completeness Check website, excuse me, this one right here, is the one where I get all of my information from. This is the one that the officers traditionally use as their guidelines in how to determine whether or not, for example, your reference letter is correct. So I will just search for reference letter right here. So this is under proof of work experience. And you'll see here the specific things that they're looking for. So yes, should be official, printed on company letterhead. It indicates here address, telephone number, and email address. But I always like to include, if the company has a website, their website address. So it would just be in their letterhead. So that's one of the first places that I would include it, is just in the actual letterhead that the company is providing. You can always provide a letter of explanation if it's not specifically listed on the letterhead in your reference letter. You can always provide a letter of explanation that indicates some of the background information that you've talked about right here in your question about, apart from the website, like the company number of offices, staff strength, rankings. The website will usually provide all of that information. But the reason that I sometimes will go to those links is only if it's difficult for the company to be found normally, or there's some other reason that would cause an officer to question. For example, maybe the company is owned by a family member. Well, in those circumstances, I see that level, that bar of what would be required to really prove work history. I see that kind of rising up a little bit if the officer has some other reason to question whether or not your work experience was actually genuine. And so flipping back to the requirements here, really, what you're focusing on is the title, the duties and responsibilities, the job status, the dates worked for the company, number of work hours per week, and the annual salary plus benefits. All of that is super, super important. And so as you're going through it and you're trying to sort through what you need to do and what you don't need to do, yeah, there's no harm in putting in the website address to make it easy for the immigration officer to find the website, right? If you have a LinkedIn page that shows you, and the company itself has a LinkedIn page, and you're listed as an employee, all of those things are awesome. All right. Okay, we'll do one more question here. Okay, I'll shift this back here. Okay, this one's from Sukhdeep, and I think I probably need to get a drink of water is what I need. Okay, my throat is drying out. Okay, dear Mark, hope you're doing well. I want to ask you a question for your next EE Live. Okay, for the proof of funds, which I have in a fixed deposit, okay, in the bank, do I need to provide, in addition to the gift deed, the money that was given to me by my father, the proof of how the money got into my father's account in the first place? He received the retirement funds, part of which he made a fixed deposit in my name. How can I show the paper trail of money from my father's retirement account to my fixed deposit? Thanks in advance. Okay. So right off the bat, one thing I want to tell you is that, yeah, you always want to show source of funds. And so if the monies were transferred from your father's account to yours, then I would provide that information showing where the funds came from and from your father's account to yours. In terms of how the funds got into your father's account, I personally don't usually go to that step. Ultimately, if they did come through retirement funds that were dispersed to your father, and that's how they originally got into his account, well, you can totally explain that. That's totally fine. But usually there isn't any necessity to explain the source of the funds in your father's account. They're not, an officer could always go back and they could ask for that. But usually I don't take that level of a step myself. A gift deed showing where the money came from out of one account, transferring into yours, is usually sufficient. So thanks for asking that question, Sukhdeep. Okay, I think we're going to stop there for the written ones, and now we're going to shift over and we're going to start answering all of your live questions here that you are all asking. All right, I'm going to try to just pull this up here. Give me 1 second. I've got so much going on my screen here. Now I've got to try and figure out where I've left my actual comments here. Let's see if I can pull them up. There they are. Okay, they disappeared on me. Now I can see them. So the question, we've got a bunch of questions that are asked, but I don't want you to post your question until I gave you the green light to do it. Wow, it's bright here. I wonder if I can get rid of this a little bit so I'm not as bright. Yeah, that's better. I was looking like I was glowing. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start. Now you guys are posting questions, which is great. So what I'll do is I'll start with the first one, basically, right here. Okay. Okay, so the first question here that's asked is from an unknown person on Facebook. And it says, hi, Mark, is there a probability of a drop in CRS? Well, guys, I think you've seen what's been transpiring. So because many people are unable to get to write actual English tests, I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm actually going to also just delete that question so that you can see my screen a little bit more clearly. If you go to the rounds of invitations, you will be able to pull up and see what's happened over the last little while. One of the things that we've been seeing is that the rounds of invitations have actually been focused on the Canadian experience class. And so April the 16th, just a few days ago, we had another round of invitations. And you can see right here that the CRS score of the lowest ranked candidate invited was 455. And what they're doing is they are pulling out all of the people in Canada that are currently working or have Canadian work experience, and they are extending invitations to them and not extending invitations to people outside of Canada right now during this uncertain time. And so many of you outside of Canada are probably super, super frustrated. But this drop down to 455 is actually a significant drop from within Canada. And traditionally, all of you outside of Canada that have had master's degrees and 3 years work experience, English off the charts, had really driven up the rounds of invitation scores. And so you can see here, they had specific provincial nominee program draws in the past, which really are separate because in all honesty, you get 600 points for that nomination. So, you know, this person here, the lowest rank, only had a score of 208 in the comprehensive ranking system because they got 600 points for the nomination. But if we go back further, you can see here, Canadian experience class, April the 9th, it was at 464, which was a significant drop from the previous one. April 9th, 2020, you can see this one was also a PNP only draw. And that one was 698, which basically means that there was a person who had 198 comprehensive ranking system points, plus the 600 they got from the province. And then we go back to March 23rd. This is also Canadian experience class, 467. And then we go back all the way to March 18th, which was no program specified, which means federal skilled worker programs were included. And that the CRS score of the lowest ranked candidate was actually, sorry, I should say this one here, number of invitations. Yeah, the lowest ranked candidate was 720. And this one here, they only extended invitations to 668 people. Excuse me. So it was just a short little one that was only just pulled out just the very, very top. And then it's not till, I guess it's all the way back to March the 4th that you can see when they actually did a full draw, 471 was the lowest total. Okay. So what we're seeing here is if you're in Canada, is really an important time for you to consider getting your application in the pool. It's essential. Now, if you haven't written your English language test, then that's going to be a barrier. And that's what's preventing many people outside of Canada from being able to submit their applications because they can't get that language test or they can't get their educational credentials assessed. So I just wanted to point that out to you guys and also point out here, if we just go back one screen, you can see the range now that they're posting. You can see now 451 to 500, that range now, finally, they're breaking it down. So as of the last draw, it was actually before the draw happened on April the 14th. This is kind of how everybody was comprised within the rankings. And if you look here, you can see that range right now, 461 to 470. There's 8,088 people in the pool at that time, but many of these people were federal skilled workers. And so the Canadian experience class actually on this draw had to bypass some of these and actually dip into this area here in order to pull out CEC candidates. So there's many people that were in Canada that were basically thinking, I don't have a prayer. I don't have an ability to stay. And because of the way the scores have been distributed and the draws focused only on the Canadian experience class, it resulted in the most recent round dropping to 455. And I know there's going to be some very happy people out there who were able to get invitations that didn't think they were going to even have a chance because the scores were always up to 470. So the world, it's an interesting world. It really is. And we'll have to see how things play out. Okay, great question. Okay, that was a long one, but I think it was important because many people have been asking those similar questions. All right. Okay, let's check this one. So Anshu says, hey, Mark, thanks for replying to my questions earlier. Just want to ask again if the federal skilled worker draws are going to take place anytime soon. I have meetings tomorrow with the head government officials. We have our conference call and we'll see. We'll see what happens. Maybe there'll be something I can report back on Thursday. But at this stage, I think because so many people are unable to write the language tests, they have so many people in Canada that are already working here that are either laid off, they're not sure what their future holds, and are ranking a little bit lower, that they're trying to give them the first shot at, it looks like, these initial invitations to apply. But it will open up again, I can tell you that. As the restrictions start to soften, they will expand it back so that they're doing draws that are not program specific. Okay? Okay, next one here. Okay, so this is from an unknown person, Facebook. They say, hey, Mark, I have both my FBI and Indian PCC in black and white originals. Would a simple LOE suffice? Thanks. Well, understand, guys, if your original is in black and white, then there's nothing to explain. That's just how it comes. The FBI, that's exactly what it is. It's a black and white. So there's no need to explain. You just need to provide a copy of the original. And if it is in black and white, then that is technically the colored version. Okay? All right, next question. This one, we're going back to YouTube. Tulu Wallop says, I submitted my application without upfront medical. When should I expect medical request? You know what? You're not going to expect the medical request. Eventually, it probably will come. But instead, what I recommend, now, there should be some panel physicians that are starting to do immigration medicals again. And in those circumstances, you're going to want to be proactive. You want to go as soon as you can, book that medical, get it done, and then upload that medical to your Express Entry file via the case-specific inquiry or the web form. And those of you who are wondering, what are you talking about, Mark? Well, if we go back here to my web page and you just type in IRCC web form, that'll probably take you to where you want to go, right here. And this is where you're going to complete your immigration medical. You're going to get your e-medical information sheet. Once that's done, you're going to go in here, you're going to fill out all this information. And then once you've completed it, you'll see here that when you click next, you have the ability to upload your document. And that's how you're going to do that. All right. Okay. Next question. Let's keep trucking along here. This one is also from an unknown Facebook person. Okay. It says, Dear Mark, I owned a company and I can arrange experience letter from my company. Is it acceptable? Well, if you're self-employed, you have a higher level to meet. And the key here is that if you're signing your own letter, they're probably going to question whether or not that letter is well, as strong as it probably should be with respect to authentication. And there's a bunch of things. One thing I will point out is I have done some past YouTube videos specifically on self-employed work experience. And those of you who are wondering, you can always go back to my YouTube channel. I'm not sure if I can actually access it right now. I've got a bunch of things going on here. Let's see, I can. Okay, so if you go back right here to my Canadian Immigration Institute YouTube channel, you'll be able to go back and search. I think you can even, I'm not sure exactly how everything plays out here. YouTube is an interesting thing. Let's see, oh, there it is. Okay, eventually you can search the channel. And I think I have some videos on self-employed. Oh, here we go, here's one. How do I claim self-employed work experience? So what I recommend is that you go to the YouTube channel, pull it up, And how do I prove work experience if I'm self-employed? There's a bunch of other ones. So there's videos that I've done that talk about some of the other things that you can do in order to try to fully support and justify your work experience in a way that immigration is going to accept it. And whenever you're self-employed, there's an element of, come on, did you really work those hours? You're the one signing the letter. So do we actually trust versus you being in an independent employment employer-employee relationship? So I'd recommend that you go check out those. I guess, Igor, if you want to post links on some of the locations, because we're broadcasting to Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope, it's not easy to just post a link. But we'll try to put that up for all of you. Just go to the YouTube channel and you can search it as well. All right. Okay. Next question here. Let's see. People are posting multiple ones, so I'm trying to search through and find ones that haven't been asked already. Okay. Okay, let's pull up this one here. This is from Phuket, and it's YouTube. I've applied for an open work permit on March 21st, and my wife is in Canada on a student visa, and my visa status is in progress. I want to know whether the visas are getting processed or not. They are. They're continuing to process applications, albeit there are some that are being given priority if they're in areas of essential service and critical to the infrastructure of Canada. So there are ones that are being given a little bit more priority, agriculture-based work permits, things like that. But yes, they are continuing to process. Now, if you submitted your application for your open work permit on March 21st, what you haven't indicated if you're in Canada or outside Canada, I'm not sure, but that you'll notice that if you're outside of Canada, I guess I should qualify this. There is a period of time where they have kind of stopped processing non-essential work permits and at the visa offices abroad until they have a chance to work through all of this backlog of essential people, but they will continue to process. So if you're in Canada, they're still processing applications, but there is that little bit of a moratorium that has happened just for the next couple weeks or so. All right. Okay. Okay, so let's pull up Steve. Steve's is massive here, and I don't care. I can just go over my screen. That's okay. So Steve says, I'm still confused about the difference between common law and marriage. Steve, I recommend you just book a consult so we can go through it. But you said here, is there any legal document to prove common law, or it can be proved by personal histories like same declared address? There are a bunch of things that you can use to support whether or not you are actually common law. But think of it in the way of a regular marital relationship. What do you have in common? What do you have to prove that you're actually physically living together? Do you have a lease agreement with both of your names on it? Yes. Do you have addresses? But do you have things in common are the most important thing. Just because you have the same address doesn't mean that maybe you're just roommates. Doesn't mean that necessarily that you're an actual in a common law relationship. So there are a bunch of things that you can look at. I recommend that you actually go and take a look at the document checklist for the spousal sponsorship application process. And it's about the second to last page. It gives a bunch of other documents that you could prove to establish that your relationship is genuine. But common law have been living together for 1 year. And in those circumstances, you're going to want to provide documentation that shows both of you are in the same location, that you have a shared life together that predates 1 year from the day that you submit your application. So those are some of the things that I put in there. Okay. Okay, we'll move on here. And I want to give a big shout out to this unknown person who tagged Layla to come join the live immigration Q&A. So thanks a lot, unknown person. Okay, next is from Sarah. She says, hey, Mark. Well, she says, hello, Mark. I'd appreciate it if you could give me advice about sending an application for the bridging open work permit if I don't have the acknowledgement of receipt. Well, you can't. Technically, the bridging open work permit requires that you have received your acknowledgement of receipt before you can submit that application. What we don't know right now is how much flexibility immigration is going to be giving to you. In order to submit your bridging open work permit application, yes, you need to have your acknowledgement of receipt. If you filed an express entry application, in other words, an EAPR, just the simple confirmation that you get after you submit your EAPR is sufficient to then apply for your bridging open work permit. But if you are if you're submitting a paper-based application, then the bridging open work permit requirements stipulate that you need that acknowledgement of receipt. Immigration has said that they will be flexible in when people are extending their work permits, and they've encouraged people to do it so that they can maintain implied status. But we haven't received any specific direction if they're actually going to waive specific program requirements. They may allow people to delay submitting something that's mandatory, but the actual components that form a complete application or program requirements, eligibility requirements, they've repeatedly told us that they're not willing to waive those. So Sarah, in all honesty, I would need to see a lot more information. I recommend you book a consult. In 25 minutes, we can go through everything and we can sort out exactly what steps you need to take to ensure that you don't fall out of status, because I understand and I can see how, the situation you're in is probably pretty desperate. You may or may not even be continuing to work right now. You could be laid off. But I recommend you book a consult, Sarah. Those of you who are new to everything that I'm doing, all you have to do to book a consult with me is to go to my Holthe Law website, so holthelaw.com, and then right here in the top you can see there's a Start Here button. And if you click on the Start Here, you just fill in the drop-down menu according to what your issue is. So for Sarah, it would be individual immigration, and then I want to enter or remain in Canada temporarily, and I want to work in Canada. And then once you're here, then you fill in your information, and then it goes automatically into our little system, and we can set that consult up for you right away. Okay, all right, let's shift to our next question here. All right, so this one is... Okay, so I'll post this just for Maria's sake. So these kinds of questions are not ones that we typically address in our live Q&As, because all I would say is go to the website and read it. How the Ontario PNP program works. There are so many different programs. There are different types of streams that people apply under, and a lot of them are different. So Maria, it's not something that I can fully answer in a live Q&A, but I appreciate you taking the time to ask. So I recommend you go to the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, go to their website and just take a look, review. All right. Okay, this unknown person says, I graduated from a Canadian college, but I lost my diploma and colleges are closed. But I do have a transcript. Would that be enough? Well, in many cases, that may be enough if you are from a Canadian college. However, in these circumstances, if you absolutely had to submit your application and all you had was the transcript, then that would be a perfect example of where I would provide a letter of explanation stating that I will provide a copy of the diploma as soon as the schools are open and they can provide me with a copy. And so the transcript is an important document, and it forms a part of the Express Entry personal document checklist. They actually request those when you're claiming Canadian education. And so in your situation, that is how I would do it. I'd be careful with how you describe in your letter of explanation. I would make sure you're very clear. And often I would include my letter of explanation right at the beginning of the section where you're uploading your education. That's what I recommend that you do. And at this stage, we don't have a lot of information, but if you're running out of time, your ITA is getting ready to expire and you have to submit your application, if it's Express Entry, that's how I approach it. Okay. Okay, this one is another unknown person. We got a lot of unknowns. It's like everybody's name is all dropped off of their Facebook pages. Okay, this one says, hi, Mark. I've applied in November 2019. However, no updates on the profile yet. How long should it take? Not a clue. That's one I cannot answer. We don't know where things are at. Everything obviously is taking longer. So if you've got an Express Entry application in the queue, do not expect this to be resolved in the 6-month processing times. It's going to take longer. That's just a given. Okay, we've got some questions that are a little bit long. They need to be a little bit shorter. So we'll jump here to this person. Can we claim a reference letter from one of the senior employees in the absence of my manager as he switched to some other company? If we go back once again to our page here, and we'll see if I've got this one. Okay, let's see. We'll find the right page here. We'll go back to the rounds of, we'll go back to the completeness check page here. And whenever I have a question, this is what I follow. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to drop down I'm going to delete that out of the way. We go back to here, our reference letter. And you can see here that it should be the signature of the immediate supervisor or personnel officer at the company. So if your immediate supervisor is not available, then what I recommend for you, if that person has actually no longer with it, your immediate supervisor, then I recommend you go to the personnel officer, your HR manager, someone else. You probably do not want to have just a senior employee unless they have an ability to bind the company or to actually issue a letter on letterhead. Maybe they do. Maybe the HR manager says, sure, that senior employee can sign off. What a senior employee is, really, you haven't provided much description as to what that person is. But I always try to do it with the HR manager or a supervisor. If it's a new supervisor, they still know that you've been working with the company, can still confirm that your duties and responsibilities haven't changed. So that's the direction that I would go. And I wouldn't necessarily go with some random senior employee, because the government, if they called and reached out to the company and said, hey, we're just checking up on this unknown person's work experience, and the HR manager says, we didn't produce that letter, we don't know where it came from, you're going to have a whole lot more problems than if you just got the HR manager to do it in the first place. All right. Good question. Okay. Next one here. Adil says, I'm from Pakistan. Okay. So this is another example. Adil is asking basically what a consult would result in. So Adil, I recommend you book a consult and we can talk about whether or not you're eligible for immigration. All right. Cruising along. We're making some good time here. Okay, let's take a look at this. My wife's 1-year experience is completed on May 8th. Okay, that's great. Our CRS score is 460. We have 18 days before we submit our file. Should we go ahead and submit in 1 or 2 days? Will this make any difference? Okay, I'm guessing that you're talking about submitting your profile. The reality is you just need to make sure that you've got that 1 year of experience. If you've said you've got 18 days before you submit your file, I don't know if that means you've already got your profile. Boy, that's a tough one. I'm just not sure exactly what you're asking there. Ultimately, when it comes to timing, when you submit the application, you just need to make sure. Oh, sorry. You know what? I see the question now. My apologies. My wife's experience is completed on May 8th. We're not there yet. Wait till she completes it. That's my advice every time. Wait till she completes it, even though the work experience is calculated in Express Entry based on a month-by-month basis, not a day-by-day basis. So when you fill out your profile, sometimes they give you credit when you actually don't deserve it. I never ever want to take that chance. So I'll wait till she's actually completed the full, May 8th. I wouldn't submit until then. Okay. All right. Let's keep on going through here. Okay, this one is Sager. It says, hey, Mark, thank you so much for that effective communication. I've been in Vancouver for 6 years as a student, finishing college, and will graduate bachelor's in this summer. Can I use my 6 years of staying here as a benefit to my PR application? Sager, that question also is very broad. Yes, you can include experience, but it's your college and your graduation that you're going to be able to include. If you've been here just as a student, any work experience that you have, you can't claim for the purposes of the Canadian Experience class. So the benefits are that you've got your Canadian education. Really, that's what it comes down to. Okay, next question. We'll go back to YouTube here. So Mohammed says, I've applied for a work permit in January. I've done my biometrics also. Great. And my visa status is in progress. I want to know whether the visa is getting processed or not. If you are in Canada, so you applied for your work permit back in January 15th. I don't know if you're inside or outside Canada, but if you've already completed your biometrics, yeah, they are still processing. It's just that in some circumstances, they are prioritizing some work permits over another based on COVID-19. And essential services are obviously getting special treatment. And when it comes to processing overseas, there is a little bit of a moratorium where they've stopped processing applications that are not super urgent and have requested people not to submit new ones until the moratorium is lifted. Okay, let's see what we have here. This is another similar question. I'll be completing my 1 year on May 7th to qualify for CEC. Should I wait till then to submit my profile? Yes, wait. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, Samit, also from YouTube, says, my wife is planning to study in September. She was graduated in 2010 in commercial field. She is having continuous work experience. Any chance for her? Okay. I think you're asking, does she have a chance of getting the study permit approved? Phew, that's one that is we'll have to see how things unfold. Obviously, at this stage right now, study permit applications being accepted, those kinds of applications are not considered essential right now, unless you've already got your application approved and you're just waiting to travel. Those individuals, when it comes to the travel restrictions, that's really what's coming down. We don't know what September is going to look like. But in terms of whether or not your study permit is going to be approved, that's something I can't answer. I can't give you any indication. Obviously, what do they look at? They look at age, how long you've been out of school. If she graduated in 2010, that's 10 years ago. Why are you going to school? Are you going to be able to show that coming to school is actually going to result in you being able to meet your wife being able to go back and have a better employment opportunities because of the Canadian education? Those are the factors that they look at, among others. Ties to your country, will you even go back? All of that plays a role. Okay. Lotfi says, hey, Mark. Mark with a C. Hey, I like that. That's a nice French spelling of Mark. Can I lose age points while in the pool? Yeah, you can. Once you receive an invitation to apply, that is when your age is locked in. But before that, yes, you can lose those 5 points every time you have a birthday, and it's calculated automatically. Okay. Here's a good question. This is from Jeet. Is it worth coming? Because recovery or recession might occur. You're right. It is. It's a very, very good question. And all of those things are going to play a role. And if the industries are shut down, if businesses don't have jobs, it might be more difficult for you as a new immigrant to be able to find and land a job. Now, that's a very, very good lead-in to something that I am looking at creating right now, which is an immigration settlement guide, essentially. Now, I haven't quite figured out exactly what I'm going to call it, but the whole purpose of it is to create resources for people who are thinking about coming to Canada and how to increase your chances of successfully settling. So resources, tips, access to everything from how to set up your bank accounts to, most importantly, finding jobs, and tips for interview success and resume writing and all those kinds of things. So there's so many people that have come through and have become graduates or alumni of my Canadian Immigration Institute. And I realized that lots of them are coming and are often struggling and having difficulty getting settled. And some little tips and tricks can substantially increase their chances of success. So that's something that I'm working on right now. And I'm going to be opening up a new private Facebook group just for people that are landed, have got their COPRs, or have got their passport requests. And at that stage, you can be eligible to join this private group where we're going to talk about all those kinds of things and eventually build it into a course to help people with the navigation process and the settlement. All right. Okay. So is it worth coming? Well, I think in every case, you would rather have a choice of whether or not you wanted to immigrate or not. And if you already have your permanent residence, that's going to put you in a far greater position than if you don't. So if you decide now, the economy's not great, I shouldn't go to Canada. Well, maybe in 3 years, you're no longer eligible. Maybe that open window that you had to be able to immigrate to Canada is closed now because you're older. Maybe there's been changes to the immigration programs. So if I have an option and you're thinking that you might want to do it, I would pursue it without reservation now, because what we say in Canada, one of our sayings is a bird in the hand right here, if you can see it, is better than two in the bush, which basically means if you've already got something, why would you give that up when there isn't a guaranteed chance you're going to have that better option or two things in the future? Great question, though. Thank you. Okay. Saima is tuning in from Riyadh. Great. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Okay, how to prove our NOC code. Can you please elaborate what docs should be there and can be verified by what means? Okay, so proving your NOC code is really the reference letter from your employer with job duties that are listed in a very, very full way that match substantially with the main duties set out in the NOC profile description. So you have to find your NOC by evaluating and comparing your actual duties that are listed in your reference letter with the duties listed for that NOC. All right, good question. Everything's a good question. You guys are asking lots of good questions. Okay, another Facebook, Saima says, IELTS scores are lowered for healthcare professionals. CRS on the whole? No. When it comes to IELTS scores, certain P&P programs may have different programs that are geared towards healthcare professionals, the various provincial nominee programs. But when it comes to qualifying through express entry, it doesn't matter what occupation you're in. If you're qualifying through the Canadian Experience class, then yes, there are lower IELTS scores that are accepted, but the comprehensive ranking system still is factored and based on your scores. And so you're not going to rank as high. Obviously, the Federal Skilled Trade Program has different standards, and often the candidates qualifying through that have different standards. But when it comes to healthcare professionals, no, the IELTS scores are, they're assessed the same for the purposes of the comprehensive ranking system. Okay, Katamba here from Uganda. Welcome, Katamba. With your experience, can you handle one's PNP application, one without experience nor relative in Canada? Katamba, the reality is I can help anyone with their immigration applications if they meet the eligibility requirements. What I can't do is say, because you hire me, therefore I'm magically going to make you more eligible than before you hired me. And if there's any consultant, any representative out there that's telling you that if you hire them, they can guarantee your permanent residence, don't trust them. They are misrepresenting, they are lying. Avoid them like the plague, okay? Avoid them like COVID-19. All right. Okay, next one here. Excuse me. Okay, there are some questions that people are posting like this that basically says, can you help me immigrate to Canada? You would need Mr. Unknown here to book a paid consult, and then we can assess your eligibility. Okay, and this one here, this one is university is offering, which university is offering masters in construction without IELTS? You need to be able to show that you can speak English, my friend. And you're not going to be successful doing a master's program in Canada unless you have English at a high level via a good score. Now, some schools may not require you to write IELTS. Maybe they'll require you to write the TOEFL or something else, but you need to be able to speak English. Okay, let's see. How are we doing for time? We're actually at 2:04 right now. I'm just going to pull up my calendar and make sure that I don't have something else here that I am missing. Let's see here. Nope, we're good. I always have to look at my calendar because people, I have an automated calendar system where people can actually go in and book appointments, consults, once they filled out the initial intake. So I just did a double check there. Okay, let's see who's next here. Okay, same thing for you, Faria. You need to book a paid consult. What are your chances? That's something that I'd have to look at very carefully to evaluate. Now, obviously, your situation right here, you are super experienced. You have tons of wonderful work experience, life knowledge, but the express entry system doesn't reward you. So if you're outside of Canada, you're 47, which, congratulations. I myself am 47 years old. With tons of experience, it's going to be really hard for you to score high enough, because once you hit 45 points, you're losing. You've lost all your age points, over 100 points, and you just can't compete. So they only really value people who are applying now with human capital alone. In other words, no job offer, no experience in Canada. You really have to be young in order to get through that. Really, no more than 30 years old. Okay. Okay, next question here. This is back to YouTube. Wellwyn says, do I need to show all the pay slips for the work history? Because I worked part-time and then worked as full-time. I've only shown full-time in my profile. I won't have a reference letter as well. Wellwyn, if you don't have a reference letter, you're hooped, my friend. Like if you can, unless you can find a way to show with a contract or something that you have actually worked all of those hours, that you're not going to be successful. An immigration officer is going to seriously question and reject that work experience. And I have some reservations as well. If you shown your time as full-time in your profile, but you've only worked part-time, I'm sure that's not what you meant in your question, but you can't misrepresent on your application. You have to make sure that you're actually listing things properly. And so when it comes for pay slips, if I don't have a reference letter and the company isn't cooperating, then I go to crazy lengths to make sure I'm proving everything. And the key for you, if you're proving foreign work experience, is that you are providing pay slips to cover at least at a minimum those 3 years of work experience. That's one of the ways to show and confirm if you don't have a reference letter. But boy, it's tough. And I spend a lot of time doing consults with my clients navigating the different ways and exploring possibilities to prove work experience when a reference letter is not being issued. All right. Okay. We're cruising down here. Okay, let's see. Okay, we've got an unknown person saying, Mark, I just want to say thank you. You're very welcome. Okay. Okay, let's take a look at this one from Facebook. We submitted our profile in the first week of March with CRS of 470. Since all the draws that happened were for CAC, wanted to know our chances and the realistic timeline to expect. Okay, like I said, I've got another call tomorrow with immigration. I think we can realistically see that they're drawing CECs right now alone and no federal skilled workers until the dust settles with all of this, until they figure out where the world is at, until they figure out in terms of travel and all of those things, language tests, educational credential assessments. So that right now they are really focusing on CECs because the people are in Canada. So if you're sitting at 470, I think you still have chances. You do, but I understand the uncertainty. And right now we don't have any indication and no one knows for certain. There's lots of speculation, but I can tell you if they were going to do something, I would know as a part of their Canadian Bar Association and the regular calls that we have. All right. Okay, next question. Okay, we've got Diamond back here. Hey, Mark, for someone who just got their study permit last week in Canada approved, awesome. Studies start in September. Can she work legally before school starts? That's a great question. There's some wonderful resources. I'm not going to be able to go and find all of them, but there's some wonderful resources that talk about the fact that if you're not actually in Canada, but you have your study permit, you have things in place, but you can't travel, you can actually start and study and take classes. At this stage, up to 50% of your classes, you can get credit for them before you actually arrive in Canada. So the government recognizes for international students the challenges that exist. If you can start your classes online in Canada, then you can start to claim some of that education, and you can. It is eligible for the purposes of your postgrad work permit. So those are some of the factors, and I'm just not going to have time to go and dig up that link for you. But you can go to the COVID-19 resources on the IRCC website and go to the section on students. And it's Facebook here, so maybe Igor, you could post that comment for Diamond, okay? Post a link for Diamond to that resource. Okay, Nithin says, do we need to do medicals and collect PCCs for children below 18? No, you do not need to collect PCCs, but medicals, yes, you do. So not the police certificates, but the medicals. Okay, great question. All right, let's see here. Okay, here's a good question. This one's from Iffy. And it says, hey, Mark, for someone who just got their study permit last week in Canada approved, studies start in September 2020, can she work legally before the school starts? Did I answer that question? No, this is a different one. They're so similar. Can she work legally before school starts? No. No. You have to show that you're registered in classes in order to be eligible to work off campus. So that's the most important part. So no, you can't work until you've actually you've been registered for classes. Okay, next one on YouTube. Anya says, I submitted my express entry application and got asked for biometrics a week ago. Do they process applications before getting your biometrics, or my application will be delayed? At this stage, Anya, your application will be delayed unless we hear something else. Biometrics are still a requirement, and they're not at this stage willing to waive them. So your application, they'll just give you extensions of time in order to submit it. I suspect that things are going to start to soften a little bit here in the coming, weeks or month. They're going to start, removing some of the restrictions. But yeah, at this stage, a complete waiver of biometrics, I don't see on the radar. Okay. Okay, here's a good example here. Another great question. Hi, Mark. Due to the travel restrictions, I'd like to inform IRCC that I may not be able to make it before my visa expires. Do I need to explain further why I couldn't travel other than the pandemic at hand by uploading my expired flight ticket? Yeah, you've done exactly what you need to do. That's exactly what you do. You just need to explain. It's the pandemic. I can't travel, and that will be sufficient. Uploading an expired flight ticket is 100%. That's a great idea. Very, very good. Okay, Sarah says, thanks for answering my question. You're very welcome, Sarah. Okay. Okay, this one is also Lotfi, says, can I lose age points while in the pool? Yes, you can. So if you turn 36 this May and you don't yet have an invitation to apply, you will lose 5 points on that birthday. Okay. Okay, so this is a lengthy question from Tasmir, which basically says, "Hey, do I qualify for CEC? Should I apply? To immigrate?" That, my friend, you have to make a decision as to whether or not you proceed. But like I answered before, I honestly believe that it's better to have a bird in the hand. In other words, starting the process and trying to proceed than holding off and then not moving forward. Especially when you're 13 years of under consumer durable industry, the age is going to be a factor for you, Tasmir. So if you can, I would move forward as quickly as possible. It may even be tough right now. Okay, next question. This one says, hello, Mark. I'm hoping you're doing well. Keeping the current situation in view of COVID, I think it's going to take at least a few more months to get things back to normal. That's probably true. Do you know if it's going to be an issue for those applicants who are aspiring to drop their LMIA applications in 2021? When it comes to LMIA, obviously, one of the most important factors of that whole process is being able to show there's no Canadian or permanent resident willing or able to fill the position. That's the employer's job to apply for the LMIA. And in some industries, it's going to be easy. Like even agriculture right now, you can get work permits in those industries. But we don't know what the future is going to hold. 2021, we just don't know. But one thing's interesting. Canada is taking a very proactive approach to this. Yes, processing is slowing down, but Canada has not stopped. And it'll be very interesting to see how things unfold as Canada continues to process applications, admit immigrants, while other countries like the US may completely stop. And much of the research that's done, and a big shout out to the Conference Board of Canada, who's been doing some really good research on these topics. And I'd encourage you guys to check it out. They have indicated and posted very, very favorable things about Canada's ability to bounce back after COVID-19 and these isolation policies that have been implemented. They are very, very favorable that things will bounce back very positively. And so all of you, don't lose hope in Canada. I think there's going to be just as much demand as there ever was once these restrictions are lifted. Okay. All right. We're getting near the end, and I know we've got a lot of people, and people have been so patient waiting for me to answer their questions. Eventually, I am going to have to stop and pull the plug because it's just so long. But remember, Thursday, we're going to do this all over again. Okay. I'll answer 2 more questions. Okay. Okay. So here's one. It says, "Hi, Mark, is IRCC processing the PR applications which are submitted before the lockdown?" Yes. The answer is yes. Now, things like biometrics and other things like that, if you haven't yet obtained them, will delay the finalization of applications. And obviously, the travel restrictions will as well prevent people from being able to travel. But yes, they are still processing. Okay. This one we'll finish off with Lay. Actually, we'll do one more YouTube one after Lay. "Hi, Mark. I'm about to finish my course this July. However, I'm not eligible for postgrad work permit. What would be my next step? Should I process my MPNP or get a work permit or extend my study and or visit?" Lee, that is something that you need to book a paid consultation to discuss. I'm assuming that maybe you've already obtained a postgrad work permit, because to come and finish a course and not be eligible for the postgrad is horrible. That is terrible. Hopefully someone didn't convince you to go to school and one of these education agents to a school that wasn't eligible to offer postgrads. But it's heartbreaking to see someone come spend so much money and not be able to get that postgrad work permit. So I recommend you book a consult, Leah, and we can talk about that. Okay, we'll flip over here. And actually, I'll do two YouTube questions just to even it out. So Pavanguru number 1 here says, "Since US stopped immigration temporarily, how will Canada deal with it?" I just answered that question. Canada is going to continue to process. We're going to continue to move forward with our immigration programs. And it'll be very interesting to see where our countries are in the coming years. If the US puts a halt to immigration, at least, or suspends things while Canada continues to process, we'll just see. But Canada isn't stopping. Okay, David says, "The BCPNP makes reference to bona fide job offers, but not LMIAs. Is it safe to assume that an LMIA is not required for provincial nomination in BC, or is an LMIA inferred? Please comment. Thanks." David, that question is too broad, my friend. each program has different requirements. One thing you need to understand is that in some cases, job offers, depending upon the program, may be sufficient even for people that have open work permits. But other programs are not and may specifically require. For each program, there is a specific definition of what constitutes a legitimate job offer. Some cases it is an LMIA, but some cases it may be an employer-specific work permit for someone who's come in under intercompany transfer provisions or under one of our international treaties with different countries that have a named employer work permit. Those are often okay as well, not just LMIAs. And some cases, like I said, it's people that are on either postgrads or open work permits, but it depends upon the stream. So it's not something I can answer straight up. Okay. All right. I think we are now officially going to come to an end. So I want to express appreciation to everybody who's tuned in. This has been another awesome live Q&A. As always, you guys, I want to emphasize that this whole process is made possible by the Canadian Immigration Institute. And so if you go here to our page, you will see that one of the flagship courses that I offer is my express entry. And if you click on see our courses right at the beginning here, you can access it by going to Canadian Immigration Institute. I personally created this entire course. It is my express entry, complete step-by-step course to doing it yourself. And for those of you who are tuned in live, if you choose to purchase it now and you type in the code EEDIY50 and click apply, you get 50% off that course if you act now. All right. So big shout out to the Canadian Immigration Institute. Because of that, I'm able to spend this time with you. I'm an immigration lawyer. And I've told you guys, some of you initially were confusing me with an immigration consultant or just some Yahoo who immigrated themselves and now are offering advice on immigration. That is not the case. I am a legitimate immigration lawyer. I'm just unconventional. I'm just a little bit different. I just like to be fun. And apparently some people are interpreting that fun and my funky backgrounds and broadcasting from Egypt as not being very professional and maybe turning people off that otherwise may have considered using my services. So I hopefully people appreciate my sense of humor and the fact I want to be personable and open and want people to know who I am. But I am most definitely a Canadian immigration lawyer who leverages heavily off of my past immigration officer experience to provide just what I feel is a unique kind of offering to my clients. And I do these live Q&As just as a way of giving back. Most lawyers don't ever take the time to do it, but I do because I love to do it. I love to help. I love to share information freely without an expectation in return. Yes, do I want this to help increase my profile, to help people find me? Yes, because I don't live in a large center in Canada. I chose to raise my family in a small community. And in fact, the community is Lethbridge, Alberta. And so in order to do this and to practice it the way I want to, I started doing social media stuff. But I hated the sterile, the fact that many people just, that do live videos, especially lawyers, don't really talk a lot about themselves. You don't know who they are as a person. And there's nothing that I hate more than these nameless, faceless websites where they've got all these fancy infographics and different things where they're pumping out all this information, but you don't even really know who's doing your application. That's the difference. That's the change that I made when I started Holthe Immigration Law, to change to a collaborative process where us immigration lawyers work directly with you to help you navigate this whole process. And yes, once again, I am an immigration lawyer. I worked my butt off. I worked my butt off for 5 years to get my undergraduate degree, which was a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Education. And I actually taught high school for a year before I went to law school for another 3 years. And all of the thousands of dollars. And when you have law schools where there is a, a 10% acceptance rate, you have to have done really well in your undergraduate and write the LSAT, the legal entrance exam, in order to get into law school. And then after that, you have to get through. And in the provinces in Canada, you have to then work for a whole year under another lawyer before you're eligible to be called to the bar as a lawyer. And I'm very, very proud of that. I'm so proud of the profession that I work under as a lawyer, the good that us immigration lawyers accomplish across the country. And I do what I do because I love it, because I want to help people and that I genuinely care about people. It's not just about lining my pockets with money. You know, I have a family, I have 4 children, a wonderful wife. I have a mother who is retired, who is has had a lot of struggles in her life financially, helping myself and my other 3 brothers. When my father passed away when I was young in school, my mother basically supported all 4 of us boys, and she gave away her retirement in order to help my brothers and to make it through as they got themselves established. And now, going to law school, one of my motivators was to be able to have enough money to support her. And so, do I want you to hire me? Yes. Do I want you to purchase my guide? Yes. Why? Well, one, I believe honestly in the service that I offer. I know that I can help you. That's the first and foremost. I know that I can help you more than if you were just to do it on your own. I have no reservations making that statement. And I spent hundreds of hours creating the actual guide itself. And I keep calling it a guide. Igor has told me repeatedly it's not a guide, it's a course. And it really is full of so many lessons. Every aspect of Express Entry. I created that course so that people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford my service, maybe they're in India or maybe they're in Africa and couldn't afford to hire me at my $3,000 rate, which I've also discounted substantially just because I love working with people, they would be able to have a way to afford that course and get the help that they need. And that's why I do what I do. So I appreciate everyone that that has been so supportive over the years. I recognize that my methods are somewhat unconventional, and sometimes my videos are a little bit goofy and immature and not professional. I like to post things about my family and things that I'm doing with my kids outside of the office so that you know who you're dealing with. But it was recently brought to my attention that maybe I'm losing out on some work from people that would really like to hire a lawyer because they think I'm a consultant or think I'm some person that actually isn't, a professional. And what does that mean? Well, maybe one day I'll change that notion of a professional. But today I wore my suit. I've got my office here you can see behind me this way. You can see my files that are stacked up behind me of active clients that I'm working for. And our office is virtual so that I don't have to charge you for a fancy boardroom or some fancy corner office. I'm actually able to be with and support you in the way I want to without having to charge you what I normally would and what if I had a traditional immigration law office. So there you have it, guys. I think I'll end talking now, but it was a pleasure. I will see you guys on Thursday, same time, 1 p.m. I was a little bit late today, sorry, but 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you have questions, send them in right here to the live Q&A in the subject line to info@holthelaw.com. So send those in to me, okay? And that's how you can get your question answered. And I can't answer all of them. I do my very best to pick out the ones that I think are going to be the best. And then I try to reward the people that ask questions live, that show up and are there. And it's amazing how many people are still watching. And we had a really, really good turnout today. Let people know that it's happening. Thanks, guys. This is Mark Holthe, Canadian immigration lawyer, ex-immigration officer, and former high school teacher, signing off, wishing you guys all the best wellness, health, safety as we navigate this crazy world of COVID-19. Take care, guys.